All right. My name is Ludwig Hiedler from Weingut Hiedler, old family estate in Langenlois, founded in 1856. And today we're sitting on the terrace with a nice view on the Heiligenstein. And I'm not trying to show off a biceps because I don't have one. Here's the Geisberg. And I'm want to tell you a little bit about the 2019 vintage, which definitely was one of the greatest vintages of the last decade. So we had a beautiful finish of the decade with 2019. 2019. You want to hear a little bit about how the weather was, I guess, and how that affected the wine later. So basically, as we had the situation also the last couple of years, the winter was starting relatively mild. So usually all of this is covered in snow, but not the last couple of years. We do get some snow, but not as much as we used to, as I remember from being a kid and playing up there with my friends. So that's a long time ago that we had a lot of snow, but we had enough coldness and enough snow to get at least a little bit of water reservoir. Even though from a super dry 2018 that was already relatively dangerous, let's say. But we're moving towards a more dry climate. I'm sure you have heard from my colleagues. And so we're now trying to also find ways how to cope with this new climate. And basically, this year will be a big year. Now we have a lot of time of experimenting what we can do with the soils. And I'm going to try out plant coal for the first time. So it's just coal that you can work in the soil with compost to make the soil hold more water. Yeah. But yeah, so mild winter. Then it got kind of cold. So in end of February, it got very cold. Not as cold as 2018. 2018, we had some minus 15 degrees end of February, beginning of March. So not that cold, but was minus degrees. So enough to freeze the soil a little bit and kill whatever is hurting the vineyards that's trying to survive in the soil. So that was always a benefit for us. And then we went into we skipped spring and we went straight into summer, just like the year before. So with March we hit 25 degrees, so between 20-25 degrees every day. And end of March the vines were the buds were swelling, and bud break happened mid of April, and it was extremely dry. Last year was the driest spring we recorded in, I think, 3 decades. But we're beating it right now. So this spring is even drier, which is unfortunate. But yeah, let's see. So the the great thing that happened, which usually wouldn't be that much of a great thing, but last year it was, is that with the beginning of May, there was, and that event really defined the whole vintage. We had a cold, yeah, a cold weather phenomenon, so to say, kind of pushing into Europe, and that was bringing a lot of rain. A lot of rain. It was super cold. It was just the day when we usually have a big event up here on this terrace. We had only 5 degrees. So usually we wanted to sit outside, but obviously with 5 degrees was very cold. It was very rainy, and so the vines that were already quite far, they kind of stopped growing because it was too cold. Grew very slowly. They can't stop, but they grew very slowly. And so we set back those 2 weeks that we had kind of already, how do you say in English? Uh, so we were 2 weeks ahead, and we kind of set everything back by those 2 weeks. So at the end of May, uh, we got enough water for the summer, and the temperature is starting picking up really quickly. But we also were back to normal, basically where we usually, on average, have the growth, the vegetation. And so then with June, before I visited you guys, we hit 36 degrees already, mid of June. That was the hottest period of the year in June, like just after super cold May, super hot spring. And then we had like a boost again in the vineyard, so everything started growing. So we needed more people than usual to kind of work everything, since we work everything by hand still, and we want to keep it like this. It's not that easy to manage with, so you need to manage it with enough people if it's growing fast. And I think that's something that will happen more regularly. What we have now though is, because it's so dry, uh, we had bud break last week, but it's not really growing much. So we desperately need some rain. So that's the other side. If you have enough rain, it's growing super fast. If you don't have enough rain, it doesn't grow at all. Uh, First time we experienced it like this. Yeah, and then we had July, extremely dry, very hot, nothing unusual. So summers are usually dry and hot in Kamtar, since it's more continental climate here. And then with August, it was another defining month, because usually also August is very dry, but this last August we got quite some rain with thunderstorms, and it wasn't too hot. It kind of cooled down relatively quickly with the end. So towards harvest, it cooled down relatively quickly, which was perfect. And so the conditions for harvest were on point. We had beautiful acidity, which we lacked in 2018, was a bit of a bolder vintage. Uh, Not an unelegant vintage, but a milder vintage. And now we have 2019, which has a beautiful acidity, very refined, fine fruit characteristics, not as loud, I feel, as 2018. So I usually feel that warmer vintages tend to have louder, more exotic fruit. So this is a bit more tamed and, calm, flowing. It's also the kind of style of wine that we always loved and love to make. And as it happens in our cellar, so really played into our hands. And we started harvest then the 4th of September, which was the first time that we did sect. So I tried to do sect since 2015, but the conditions were never really great. And 2019 finally worked out, because I thought the first one has to be a really great one. And so we started with sect, Pinot Noir Weißburgunder. Then we kind of switched relatively like quickly into the normal harvest, but just picking our youngest vines. So the problem with the young vines is that if it's dry, or it was dry, and you leave the grapes hanging for too long, you can do damage on the vine that will last for many more years after that happened. So this stress situation we usually try to avoid. It's also something my father always followed very strictly, is to really only have one grape per vine when it's 4 to 5 years. So when we start picking, and as it hits 6, 7, 8 years, we start building up the crop, and then it goes, normal crop. So we picked that. We started with and then we switched to the early pickings of Grüner Veltliner and just of our Löss, basically, the one that you all know, most important wine. And then the Camptal El Nino came again. That we call it El Nino now, because it's really coming every year. Just beginning of September, always just 2, 3, 4 days after we start harvest. we get so much rain, like all the rain that we would need in winter. In summer, we get it on 2 days in September. It wasn't as bad as 2018 this year, but it still did a little bit of damage to, let's say, the more demanding or the more sensitive varieties, not demanding, but more sensitive varieties like Riesling or Pinot Noir or Weißburgunder. Not so much to Grüner, so that's why everyone loves Grüner. It's a very robust variety, very Austrian variety, and Grüner just coped with it perfectly. There was nothing. We had the luck that the Grüner Veltliner was very loose berried in 2019. So due to the heat we had in June when we had flowering, usually we tend to get I don't know the word in English. I always forget. Milandrage. Yes. Okay. So especially with Grüner Veltliner, not so much with the other grapes, but that's perfect because Grüner Veltliner has big bunches anyway. So we also had very small grapes in 2019 as opposed to 2018. I don't know why exactly. We had this actually there was a scientific research going on that, but I haven't seen the results yet, so I just actually need to check that. But we had small grapes, so the danger for getting botrytis was relatively low, so only with that much of rain it happened a little bit. But since we do 100% hand harvest, we go through every grape anyways, and it's a minor was a minor challenge this year to clean out the grapes. And for a maximum, we tend to harvest with botrytis anyway, so we want some botrytis. So all of this perfect. After this rain event, we just had sun. We had a very cold September, or last third of September and October, like morning temperatures of 2 to 4 degrees, and in the day we hit 15 degrees. At some days it was a bit more, 20 degrees, but it never went above 20. Like if I think back on 2018, we harvested with 30 degrees on some days. So we needed to rethink the whole process of it. So 19 was a relatively classical year. And I think the wines are also following this more classical, fine, elegant, cool climate. Let's call it cool climate, even though sometimes it's hot now. Cool climate style that we all know and I love about our area, about the Kamptal, and also I think everyone else who loves the wines from the Kamptal is really happy about having wines like that. And yeah, we finished harvest at the national holiday of Austria, the 26th of October. So it was a long harvest, 2 months, almost 2 months. And we finished with Sangiovese, so with the northernmost Sangiovese in Europe. As far as I know, maybe there's already someone who planted it further up north in Germany or so. Since it's also, warming up a bit, and yeah, it's still fermenting. So there's still some tanks, some barrels that are fermenting. So that's a bit worrying, but I'm sure that's going good. I don't know why. This year I tried a few new things in the cellar. So as you may heard or have not heard, I took over the cellar, and I tried, just tried out some new ideas, and I there's a micro oxygenation thing that I already heard about many years ago at school, but never really thought about this to help the yeast start. So you can work with if you inoculate, what we mostly do. So we have a yeast isolation from the Heiligenstein that we use to inoculate all of our single vineyards. For Löss, there's also a few spontaneous fermentations, and a few, there's basically everything. Yeah, so in Löss, I have, you know, many small tanks or bigger tanks, and they all go through different process, and then when blending together, I pick those very light, bright fruited tanks, so to get this classical idea of less of an easy less wine.
Ludwig,
Yeah, and so that's it.
when you were talking about, you know, the vintage being like kind of a classical Austrian vintage with a cool kind of character, is there another vintage that you would compare this to in your mind?
It's hard to compare any vintage right now to a different one. I think from the wine it produced, or how it defined the wines. I feel it's close to 2013 and 2017, somewhere in the mix between those two, maybe more towards 2013. But I think also 2017 was phenomenal vintage that was uh, already kind of unusual, but where we had a similar, let's say, similar vegetation, not as much rain. Like it definitely 2000. What really saved 2019, because I think it would have been a super difficult vintage if that wouldn't have happened, was the May. If we didn't have the May, and I'm sure everyone told you, uh, I don't know. We probably would have started harvest in mid-August, and it would have been. We made the experience of 2018, so it would have been definitely easier than 2018. I think 2018 was, together with 2014, the most challenging vintage, and so 2019 definitely got saved by the May, and the May made it perfect, really perfect. So awesome vintage.
Excellent. Anybody have any questions? Abby wanted to point out, I think, that Uli Stein grows Sangiovese in the Mosel. So
Oh, okay. In the Mosel.
in the Mosel, yeah, of all
Jesus.
places.
In the
Wow.
northernmost part of the Mosel too, right?
Yeah.
Up in the
And when
R.
Yeah.
and when is it harvested?
I don't know. I
When
don't
he
know.
feels like it.
Because here it's super late, like, and when we harvest, we still have, you know, if I compare it to the Italian colleagues, we have so much acidity still, and by far not as much tannin, so it feels very different here. But yeah, it would be interesting to try that. I didn't know. Okay, so I'm not the northernmost.
It's
Illusion
okay.
destroyed. I
Mike,
always thought that.
Mike, you want to ask a question here?
Yeah, real quickly. First, a comment. I absolutely loved your little Home Alone meme that you put together. That was great. No, I saw that you would also you planted Chardonnay in the tall this year.
Yes, yes.
How much did you plant, and why did you decide to put it there?
We already have Chardonnay in Thal.
Okay.
So Thal is one of the drier Löss sites, because Thal has a lot of quartz sand.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not like the more loamy clay Löss like Kittmannsberg, for example. And so it's usually where it's a bit drier, where you have a good drainage in the soil. That's where we like to plant Chardonnay, because it's like a Riesling, sensitive to botrytis. So it shouldn't be too humid, so it can cope with dry soils. And well, we have been growing Chardonnay since